Hey guys, tonight we're drifting through the humid, narrow alleyways of Naples, where laundry lines hang like veils and footsteps echo across cobbled lanes that remember every secret. The smell of espresso clings to the air, but so does something else, something older, thicker, unspoken. You're walking past shuttered doors where eyes peer out but never open, and every crack in the pavement might just have a story buried beneath it. We're diving into the life of a woman who wore power not like a crown, but like a shawl. Subtle, close to the body, warm when needed, and never taken off. Maria Licciardi, the mob widow who never left Naples, ruled not with a gun, but with presence. And if you think you'd survive a week in her neighborhood without knowing which street to cross, who to nod to, and when to keep your head down, you probably wouldn't last the night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Naples doesn't scream, it hums. The city has a tempo all its own, part lullaby, part alarm bell, and Maria Licciardi is born into that melody in 1951, in the northern part of the city known as Secondigliano. Back then, the district is poor, neglected, half forgotten by the state, but fiercely remembered by those who live there. Cracked walls, broken sidewalks, and roving kids with empty stomachs and full eyes. That's Maria's cradle. She is the youngest of several children in a household where survival is a shared activity. Her father, like many men in the neighborhood, scrapes a living however he can. A little construction here, a little favor pulling there. Her mother, quieter but no less sharp, runs the household with military efficiency and the watchful eye of someone who knows that even neighbors can become informants. Maria is small for her age, not particularly loud, and not particularly noticed. She's the type of child who listens more than she speaks, observes patterns before anyone else realizes a pattern is even forming. The city teaches her quickly that being seen is dangerous, but being invisible, that's where the power grows. By the time she's old enough to sweep the kitchen floor, her older brother Gennaro has already started down a path that promises something other than poverty. He's joining a network, something the neighborhood calls La Familia, though there's no blood in that bond. It's the Camorra, Naples' own brand of organized crime, older than the Sicilian mafia, and more decentralized. Less about ceremony, more about control. In school, Maria is unremarkable. Not because she isn't bright, she is, but because she doesn't need to shine. She just needs to watch. And at home, she watches Gennaro. He comes home later each night. He speaks in code, drops names that disappear into the silence of their mother's nods. Once, Maria hears him mutter about a job at the port, something to do with crates and paperwork and someone who didn't get paid. She doesn't ask questions. She just files the tone of his voice away in her memory. There's a moment, a subtle one, when Maria first understands the real rules of her world. It's not when a neighbor goes missing or when police question someone down the block. It's when her mother, slicing bread at the table, tells her without looking up, "If someone knocks and says they're a friend of your brother, you say you're just the housemaid." Not daughter, not sister, not Maria, the housemaid. She nods and she remembers. The neighborhood changes as Gennaro rises. New shoes for the kids. A car that doesn't cough like a dying man. Groceries that come in brands, not just brown sacks. But Maria sees the other changes too. Fewer visitors during the day, more at night. People who don't smile unless Gennaro smiles first. Her mother never speaks of it, but the silence gets heavier. By the late 1960s, Gennaro has become something of a local legend. Not flashy, not like the ones in movies, but respected and feared. He controls access to certain goods, certain jobs, certain people, and all of it seems to orbit around him without ever touching him directly. That's the art of it. No fingerprints, just favors. And Maria? She becomes his shadow in the most unexpected way. Not in violence, not in bravado, but in the kitchen, where she quietly begins keeping track of who comes and goes. In the hallway, where she overhears whispers and remembers every name. By 18, she's already learned more about logistics, loyalty, and leverage than most men twice her age. Many people still think that if Maria had been born a man, she would have taken over the clan right then. But the world isn't built for that yet. So she waits, and she watches. She marries a man who's close to Gennaro, a soldier in the clan, quiet and efficient. He doesn't talk much, but Maria doesn't need talk. She needs access, and marriage gives her that. The wedding is modest but meaningful. No white dress, no long veil, just a whispered promise and a sense that something larger is beginning to turn. She becomes a wife in public, but in private she becomes more. Bookkeeper, scheduler, quiet advisor. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't carry a gun. But the boys around her start checking with her before they move. There's an evening, early in the marriage, when a deal goes wrong. Some money disappears. Gennaro is furious, pacing the courtyard. Maria steps in, just long enough to ask a question about the timing of the transaction. That one question exposes the whole. The money is recovered. Gennaro doesn't say thank you, but he nods. And from that day on, people look at Maria a little differently. The world around them keeps shifting. In the 1970s, Naples is a city balancing on a knife's edge. Political unrest, heroin flooding in from the Balkans, unemployment choking entire generations. But the Camorra thrives, and Maria learns how to read the chaos like sheet music. She's not flashy. She never will be. But that's the point. While others chase headlines, Maria builds roots. Deep ones, quiet ones that won't blow over in the storm. Secondigliano isn't the kind of place where people talk much about dreams. You survive or you don't. That's the rhythm, and Maria Licciardi has been moving to it her whole life. Now in her 20s, married to a Camorra soldier, she balances two roles. The quiet housewife and the emerging strategist behind Naples' most disciplined clan. No one gave her the keys to the kingdom. She simply kept showing up until people started handing her things without realizing it. The Camorra of the 1970s isn't yet the multinational enterprise it would become, but it's growing, especially in Secondigliano. It starts with cigarettes, contraband from Yugoslavia, filtered through 1,000 fingers and smuggled into town by fishing boats that knew more about danger than fish. Then it's furniture. Then it's heroin. And through it all, Maria watches how each product changes the streets. Gennaro, her older brother, is still the face of the family. He's careful, shrewd, a man who never yells, but who also never needs to. People follow him because they fear silence more than screams. Maria learns the art of soft power just by being near him. She helps in small ways at first. Bookkeeping, yes, but it's more than that. She starts creating systems, organizing who owes what, Who's late? Who's reliable? She suggests a new way of scheduling pickups. Less predictable, harder to trace. Gennaro takes the idea. A few weeks later, one of the collectors tells her, "Your system saved us yesterday." It's the kind of compliment you don't repeat. Her husband, meanwhile, remains in the background. He's competent, but not ambitious. Maria never minds. Ambition gets you noticed. She prefers the back door, the second table, the shadow cast just long enough for her to disappear into. Then, it happens. Her husband dies. Not a spectacular death. Not a street shooting or car bomb. No, just a quiet heart attack one humid morning. She's left a widow before her 30th birthday. For most, this would be a tragedy. For Maria, it's something different, something heavier, quieter. She doesn't cry in public. She doesn't wear black for long, but those who know her notice the change. She becomes more precise. Her words are fewer. Her silence is longer. Gennaro, perhaps seeing the shift, brings her deeper in. Officially, she's just helping with the business. Unofficially, she's becoming the spine. When meetings happen, she sits off to the side, quietly listening. When decisions are made, Gennaro glances at her before speaking. There's a story, told in low tones and always prefaced with, "You didn't hear this from me," about a time in 1979 when two rival factions wanted to challenge Gennaro's turf. They requested a sit-down. Gennaro arrived with two lieutenants. Maria came too, saying she was just there to bring food and help translate a dialect. But during the conversation, it was Maria who corrected a date, clarified a number, and reminded one of the men about a debt he hadn't paid in '76. The men left that meeting a little paler, and no one challenged the Licciardi clan again for 3 years. The 1980 earthquake changes everything. It levels entire towns in Campania and Basilicata, killing thousands. But for the Camorra, and for Maria, it's an opportunity, dark as that sounds. Billions of lire pour into the region for reconstruction, and someone needs to distribute them. Guess who already has an iron grip on the construction unions, the trucking companies, the cement supplies? Maria doesn't step in with a plan. She just shows up with a ledger. While others are scrambling to get bribes from local officials, she's already got the documents in order, the trucks on schedule, and the fake companies lined up. Many people still think that this was the turning point, when the Camorra evolved from local thuggery into something that looked suspiciously like a corporation. And if that's true, Maria Licciardi was probably its first operations director. She never touches a weapon, but she learns how to price one. She never enters a courtroom, but she makes sure every judge has someone close to them with a debt or a secret. She never threatens, but people start obeying before she speaks. By the mid-1980s, Gennaro's name is whispered across Naples with reverence. But when someone talks about how things are running so smoothly, they often lower their voice even more and add, "It's the sister. She's the one with the numbers. She doesn't look like a mob boss." That helps. She looks like a shopkeeper, a tired mother, a neighbor who might offer you a plate of pasta and ask about your niece's wedding. That's her power. No one suspects the woman who sends you soup also controls the heroin that killed your cousin. Still, she's careful. She doesn't show wealth, lives modestly, drives herself, attends church, keeps a garden. The neighbors think she's a saint. Her mother passes away in '87, quietly, without fuss. Maria organizes the funeral herself. There's a simple coffin, no flowers from politicians, no limousines, just family. Except, of course, half the mourners are on Interpol watch lists. That night, Maria walks through the house alone. She pauses at her mother's chair and, they say, sits for hours. No one hears what she says. But the next morning, she shows up at the family warehouse and reorganizes the entire operations flowchart. She's not grieving. She's evolving. Naples is evolving too. Crack cocaine is beginning to replace heroin. The market is changing. So are the alliances. Younger men are itching for control. Flashier, louder, more violent. Maria doesn't engage them. She simply adjusts, cuts ties here, forges new ones there, sells before prices dip, buys when others panic. One story claims she anticipated a supply shortage 6 months before it happened. While other clans were scrambling for product, she had enough stockpiled to triple her profits. Gennaro asked her how she knew. She reportedly said, "The price of baking soda is up. That tells me everything I need." She's that kind of quiet genius, a chess player watching a card game, letting everyone else bluff while she tracks every piece on the board. By the end of the 1980s, Gennaro is the undisputed boss of Secondigliano, but Maria is the one holding the map, not of territories, of people, because in the end, it's not streets you control, it's hearts, debts, habits, and no one understands that better than Maria Licciardi. If Naples is a city of contradictions, beauty and rot, music and mourning, then Maria Licciardi is its perfect daughter. By the early 1990s, the streets of Secondigliano pulse with the aftershocks of the past decade's drug boom. There are more satellite dishes, more gold chains, more funerals. And Maria? She's right there in the middle of it, but never at the center of attention. Her brother Gennaro, though, he's starting to shine too brightly. And in Naples, brightness draws bullets. Gennaro's name is in police files from Rome to Brussels. He's careful, yes, but not invisible anymore. He's grown used to the power, the respect, the silence that follows his footsteps like perfume. And in every whispered conversation about his empire, Maria's name drifts in, softer, slower, like smoke seeping under a closed door. She never asks for recognition. That would be vulgar. But she also never denies it when people begin turning to her directly, just for advice at first, a favor, a second opinion, an introduction. You know how it starts. Maria keeps a daily notebook, they say, not filled with confessions, but with patterns. Who's meeting who? Who's spending what? Who's nervous? Most Camorristi rule by fear. She rules by memory. One cold November morning, a lieutenant from a neighboring clan comes to her apartment, hat in hand. He doesn't need a loan. He needs a name cleared. One of his men got a girl in trouble, and the girl's uncle happens to drive for Gennaro. It's messy. Could Maria help smooth things over? She listens, sips her coffee, doesn't take notes. She simply asks, "Did the girl want this?" The man pauses, hesitates. She nods, once, then no. He leaves quietly. Later that week, the girl moves away, with enough money to disappear, and the uncle suddenly reassigned to Palermo. This is Maria's justice, quiet, decisive, not always traditional, but always final. Still, the empire is growing restless. With Gennaro's rise comes attention. With attention comes paranoia, and with paranoia comes betrayal. There are whispers, always whispers, about police moles, about younger soldiers making side deals, about loyalty losing its price tag. Maria notices it before Gennaro does. She tries to warn him. "You're too visible," she says one night after Mass. "The state doesn't care until they can show the papers a face." He brushes her off. "They've got other problems. We're ants in a flood." Maria disagrees. She's seen the flood coming. In 1993, Gennaro is arrested. Not shot, Not betrayed. Just arrested. Picked up while eating lunch, without a struggle, like a schoolboy being told recess is over. The news sends shockwaves through Naples. Gennaro Licciardi, the architect of the clan's modern rise, the silent boss of Secondigliano, is gone. Just like that. And into the silence Maria steps, not with a gun, not with a speech. With a meeting. It's held in a half-finished apartment block on the edge of town. No chairs, just crates, coffee, and tension. She arrives alone. There are 6 men there, representatives from allied families. They're expecting someone to read Gennaro's last instructions. Instead, Maria simply begins to talk. She speaks calmly, talks about shipments already in motion, debts owed, alliances honored. She knows which man's brother is in jail, which man's mistress wants a boutique in Bari, which man's courier has started drinking too much. She doesn't ask for leadership, she just leads. At the end of the meeting, no one calls her boss, but no one questions her either. And in the Camorra, that's the same thing. What follows is often referred to as the quiet consolidation. Maria takes over day-to-day operations. She doesn't declare war. She doesn't demand tribute. She simply ensures that everything keeps running, better than before. Her first major move? Stabilizing the heroin supply line. With Gennaro gone, others start sniffing around, trying to cut deals with Balkan cartels. Maria gets there first. She doesn't threaten. She offers consistency, protection, predictability. The Albanian suppliers love her. One of them, a former university student turned trafficker, reportedly says, "She made us feel like businessmen, not criminals." That may have been her greatest trick, reminding everyone that crime is a business, and the best businesses are built on reliability. At the same time, she begins reshaping the clan internally. She reduces overt violence. No more flashy hits in the street. No more midnight shootouts. That kind of chaos gets you front pages, and front pages get you investigations. Instead, Maria favors reassignment. A troublemaker suddenly finds himself managing a dead-end cigarette smuggling route. A loudmouth is quietly arrested, thanks to a well-timed tip to the police. "Better to let them fall than push them," she says once, and people listen. She also starts grooming a new class of lieutenants, more educated, less impulsive. Men who understand spreadsheets better than switchblades. She sends one of them to Spain to study logistics under the cover of a fake export company. Another is given a job managing a chain of vending machines, each one a front, of course, but also a real revenue stream. Some traditionalists grumble. They want blood, not balance sheets. But Maria doesn't bend. "There are only 2 outcomes in this life," she says to one discontent capo. "Jail or a quiet house in the country. Which one are you working toward?" He doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. Many people still think that the Camorra's golden age in the 1990s was due to Gennaro's foundations. And maybe it was. But it was Maria who kept the floors from collapsing. It was Maria who turned thuggery into a quiet, functioning empire. And yet, she never calls herself boss. Others do, though. Quietly. La Madrina, the godmother. It starts with whispers from couriers and street dealers. Then it's graffiti on a wall near the port. Then it's a joke told by a cop who doesn't realize how close his informant is to her table. Maria never acknowledges it. She just nods like someone recognizing the weather. Do you remember the way she handled that first debt collection system? Or the earthquake reconstruction? That same calm, strategic mind is now running a city. Not officially, not on paper, but power doesn't need signatures. It just needs obedience. Maria Licciardi has never needed to be loud. Her influence spreads the way dusk falls, slowly, without anyone realizing it. until the lights already changed. And now, in the mid-1990s, with Gennaro behind bars and the old guard either locked up or aging out, Naples becomes hers in everything but name. No ceremony, no speeches, just a quiet shift in posture, the way someone starts walking down the middle of the street instead of hugging the curb. That's how Maria steps into power. She doesn't declare herself the boss. Why would she? That's how men end up on TV with black bars over their eyes. Instead, she moves like the city does, fluid, cautious, always one step ahead of the storm. The clan structure, once built around Gennaro's charisma and muscle, now adapts to Maria's methods. She's uninterested in loyalty based on fear. She wants results. And she gets them, not through threats, but through incentives. Bonuses for efficient work, pensions for older foot soldiers. She introduces something like HR to organized crime. Yes, HR, mafia style. There's a young courier, barely 18, who gets caught smoking the product he's supposed to be delivering. Under Gennaro, he'd have been found in a trunk. Under Maria, he's reassigned to a warehouse under supervision, with the understanding that there won't be a third chance. 2 years later, he's head of supply coordination. This isn't softness, it's strategy. Dead men don't deliver packages. And Maria is running a business. Her new era even has a headquarters of sorts, a building near the outskirts of Secondigliano. To outsiders, it's a legitimate logistics company. To insiders, it's the nerve center of Naples' most organized criminal operation. Inside, Maria has an office. Not lavish, not grand. A desk, a couch, a fan, a coffee machine that never stops brewing. From here, she rewrites how the Camorra works. She standardizes percentages, simplifies codes, replaces vague favors with firm deadlines. She even rotates jobs so no one person becomes too powerful in one lane. There's a famous quote someone attributes to her. The only thing more dangerous than a cop is an ambitious friend. She's seen what happens when underbosses feel irreplaceable. She makes sure no one gets that comfortable again. And the money? It flows. Drugs are still the biggest revenue stream. Heroin, mostly, but also cocaine, and, increasingly, hashish from North Africa. But under Maria's watch, the clan diversifies. They get into construction again, legit contracts too, through shell companies run by men in suits who've never even seen the inside of a prison van. They buy apartments, rent out warehouses, acquire farmland, which they use as collateral or a laundering front, or sometimes just to grow actual produce, because even mafiosi need a side hustle. It's not glamorous, but it's smart, and Maria loves smart. But not everything is spreadsheets and silent nods. Violence still exists. It's just quieter now. In 1996, a mid-level affiliate starts selling drugs on the side, skipping the clan's cut. The rumor reaches Maria during lunch. She says nothing, keeps eating. By nightfall, the man's entire network has been swallowed up by another faction, under Maria's direction. No bullets, just a takeover. People say it's like she erased him with a pencil and redrew the lines. She never loses her temper. That would mean she lost control. And yet, even as her reach expands, Maria remains Maria. She lives in the same modest apartment in Naples, shops in the same corner markets, attends the same church. The priest, Father Donato, knows who she is. He knows what she does. But he also knows she helped rebuild the chapel roof after the storm. That she pays for 3 orphan scholarships at the school no one talks about. That she visits her brother in prison once a month and never misses a holy day. To many, she's still just the widow, the quiet sister of a once powerful man. a woman with a good memory and good manners. How could she possibly be dangerous? That's the trick. Many people still think that Maria's invisibility was luck, that men underestimated her simply because she was a woman. And sure, that helped. But it wasn't luck. It was design. She crafted her presence like a ghost, always just enough to notice, never enough to chase. Then something shifts. A journalist from Rome publishes a piece in L'Espresso, an exposé on the new faces of organized crime. One of those faces is hers. No photo, just a sketch and a name. Maria Licciardi, la donna che non urla, the woman who doesn't shout. It's the first time the national press acknowledges her power, and it's enough to rattle a few windows. Maria isn't angry. She's disappointed. Fame, even unwanted, is a liability. She tightens protocols, shortens meetings, changes phone numbers. For the first time, she uses a driver with a clean record. Her people begin referring to her only in code. Meanwhile, the other clans take note. Some admire her, some resent her. A few fear her, especially the younger bosses, those trying to build empires with tattoos and guns instead of schedules and diplomacy. One, a hot-headed enforcer turned capo named Carluccio, mocks her in a meeting. Says the clan needs a lion, not a nun. Maria lets him finish, smiles faintly, then asks him if he's paid his import taxes on the last 3 shipments. He hasn't. 2 days later, his entire stock is impounded. No bullets. Just bureaucracy. Carluccio never mocks her again. If this were fiction, someone would challenge her by now. Try to take her down. But real power, the kind Maria wields, is hard to attack. Because it doesn't sit on a throne. It sits everywhere. It's the storekeeper who owes her cousin a favor. The city official whose sister she helped during a messy divorce. The baker whose flour shipment always arrives on time because Maria made sure the ports stayed open during a strike. You can't shoot that kind of power. You'd have to burn down the whole city to remove it. And even then, Naples would probably hand her the matches. Widowhood never left Maria Licciardi. It became her armor. In a world where noise meant danger, her silence kept her safe. But it was more than that. It made her trustworthy, even comforting. People told her things they wouldn't dare say in front of the others. And slowly, one whisper at a time, she became the most informed person in Naples. The early years of her leadership aren't marked by violence or chaos, but by an eerie stillness. The streets of Secondigliano hum with a new kind of order. Not peace exactly. There are still addicts nodding off in alleyways and quiet gunshots in the night. But there's structure, a rhythm, like a city that's learned how to breathe underwater. Maria's enemies notice, but so does the state. Investigators start hearing a name more and more often during wiretaps and interviews. La Piccola, the little one. That's what they call her in hushed tones, part nickname, part prayer. She's small, almost bird-like in appearance, but with eyes that never blink too long. They begin building a case. But they don't know where to begin. Maria doesn't sign anything, doesn't carry a phone, doesn't even own a car in her name. The leases are under shell companies, and the shell companies are owned by people who don't technically exist. She's become mythic, and that's a problem for both sides. Meanwhile, inside the Licciardi clan, something odd is happening. Efficiency. The kind you don't associate with organized crime. Drug routes run on schedule. Cash collections are counted to the euro. And all of it, somehow, flows through Maria. She holds weekly meetings with her lieutenants in a converted basement beneath a bakery. Everyone arrives staggered. No phones, no notes, just memory and manners and rules, so many rules. She introduces limits on how many young men can be recruited each month, worried about attracting too much heat from police. She discourages open street dealing. Instead, she prefers indoor setups disguised as gambling parlors or corner cafes. She insists that every associate donate a portion of their earnings to a common welfare fund. If your wife gets sick or your kid needs school books, you can go to the fund. But only if your books are clean. Some laugh, call it socialism. But when one capo's child ends up in the hospital and Maria covers the bill without a word, no one laughs anymore. She earns loyalty not by fear, but by function, and the wider world begins to shift in response. Other clans, especially those fractured by internal wars, start reaching out to her, not for alliances at first, but for advice, mediation, help smoothing out disputes. A shipment gone missing here, a border disagreement there. Maria listens, makes a few calls, and the problem disappears. That's when it starts to happen. They begin to defer to her, not just in Secondigliano, but across Naples. She never claims a title, but the effect is the same. Maria Licciardi becomes La Regina Invisibile, the invisible queen. One Camorra historian would later describe it like this: "It wasn't that she grabbed power. She simply made everyone else believe that giving it to her was their best option. But power always comes at a price." One of the first cracks in the facade comes in the form of a cousin, Antonio, mid-20s, eager, arrogant, and stupid. He sees Maria's calm as weakness, starts freelancing, cuts a deal with a rival clan in the Spanish quarters, skimming profits from hashish runs. Maria hears about it, of course, she always does. She doesn't yell, doesn't scold. She simply invites Antonio to her house for lunch. They eat pasta, salad, coffee. She asks about his mother. Then she asks him to walk her to the market. On the way, she stops at a shop, one of her fronts, and whispers something to the owner. Antonio is gone by morning. Not dead, not disappeared, just gone. Some say she paid him to leave Naples forever. Others say he's sweeping floors in some remote village with strict instructions never to come back. Whatever the truth, the lesson is clear. You don't embarrass La Piccola. Not everyone learns it in time. In 1998, a mid-level dealer ignores Maria's instruction not to deal near a school. A child overdoses. The news makes headlines. Maria is livid, but in her own way. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't call for blood. But within a week, the man's operation is shut down, his name erased from payrolls, and his contacts reassigned. He ends up arrested, quietly, on an unrelated charge. His court-appointed lawyer is late, and no one from the clan shows up to support him. Maria's message is simple. If your chaos threatens her order, you're gone. She understands that the Camorra isn't invincible, but she also knows that attention is the real enemy. A good boss, she believes, is one the newspapers forget to mention. And yet, ironically, it's during this very moment, when her control is at its most refined, that the outside world begins to catch up. A group of anti-mafia prosecutors in Naples begins connecting dots. Women's names are popping up in unexpected places, not as girlfriends or secretaries, but as financiers, logistics managers, even enforcers. And at the center of it all, always just out of frame, Maria Licciardi. The authorities can't believe it at first. A woman? A boss? It doesn't fit the stereotype. But the facts, however shadowy, begin stacking up. They start surveillance, taps, informants. Nothing sticks. Maria's too careful, too quiet. Even her closest allies admit privately that they're never quite sure how much she knows. It's like talking to a mirror that listens. Many people still think that if she'd stopped right then, retired, vanished, she'd have remained untouchable. But Maria isn't done yet. She's not greedy. She just believes in finishing what she started. And what she started is about to grow into something much larger than Naples, because in the distance, beyond the city's narrow alleys and warm kitchens, there's a world waiting to be organized. And Maria Licciardi is very, very good at organizing things. Maria Licciardi doesn't blink at expansion. For most crime bosses, growing beyond the neighborhood means firepower, flashy alliances, and the inevitable body count. But Maria has a different approach. She builds bridges, not empires. Her method is subtle, deliberate, and deeply rooted in what the Camorra has always done best, embedding itself in the veins of daily life. By the end of the 1990s, the clan's territory stretches far beyond Secondigliano. From Scampia to Mugnano, to the outskirts of Caserta, Maria's influence moves like weather, impossible to pin down, but impossible to ignore. She doesn't take over these places in the traditional sense. She offers them something better: structure. At the time, the smaller Camorra families are flailing. Years of street wars, prison sentences, and poor leadership have hollowed out many clans. Younger bosses, often more impulsive than clever, chase fast money and faster deaths. Maria sees an opportunity. She starts reaching out, not with threats, but with invitations. They meet in cafes, at weddings, in side rooms of churches during christenings. She always arrives late, never flanked by bodyguards, always holding a small leather handbag and an expression of mild curiosity. She listens more than she talks. And then, when the time is right, she offers a simple pitch. Join us. Keep your name, your men, your turf, but fall in line. Use our systems, share our contacts, follow our rules. In exchange, she promises protection, product, and profit. Many accept, grudgingly at first, then gratefully. What Maria creates isn't a mafia. It's a syndicate, a collective. The newspapers would later call it La Secondigliano Alliance, but that's just a name. What it really is an ecosystem, and Maria is at its center, quiet as ever. She institutes a code, unwritten but universally understood. No flashy killings, no dealing near schools or hospitals, no TV interviews, no rap songs, just business. Efficient, silent, profitable. The effect is immediate. Violence drops, profits rise, and most importantly, the police can't figure out what's happening. They notice the lack of headlines, the absence of car bombs, the sudden surge in real estate investments along the coast. It's like the Camorra has gone to sleep. But that's the trick. Maria hasn't put the beast to sleep. She's taught it how to purr. There's a story that floats around from this period about a bar owner in Melito who refuses to join the alliance. He thinks Maria is just another mobster in pearls. He mocks her at a local meeting, calls her a school marm pretending to be a boss. 3 months later, his liquor license is revoked. His electricity is cut. His supplier mysteriously raises prices. His teenage nephew is arrested for possession after a random police stop. No bullets, no blood, just death by bureaucracy. He sells the bar. The new owner? A cousin of Maria's. She doesn't retaliate, she rearranges. This is her gift. While her methods are modern, she still honors the old rules. Elders are respected. Family ties matter. She never breaks bread without inviting those who matter. She sends gifts to widows, pays hospital bills for old soldiers, organizes baptisms for the children of men who can no longer walk freely through Naples, and still she stays in her same apartment. People start to say that her front door is more powerful than the mayor's office. Even Rome begins to notice. Not the Vatican, though Maria remains devout, attending Mass each Sunday. and funding renovations at 3 different churches. But the state, the Italian government, struggling with its endless war on mafia influence, hears whispers of a female figure at the top of a growing alliance. They don't believe it at first. A woman in charge of that much? But their own intel confirms it. Tap after tap, file after file. Maria is in every conversation, even when she's not in the room. One prosecutor, frustrated with the lack of concrete evidence, is reported to have muttered, "It's like she evaporates before we can see her shadow." Still, they build the case, slowly, methodically, waiting for a slip-up. And Maria, she continues, she expands the clan's operations into northern Italy, quietly funding transport companies in Milan, investing in hotels near Bergamo, even touching the tourism trade along the Amalfi coast. She buys silence, not loyalty, efficiency, not glamour. It's around this time that she makes her most daring move yet, streamlining international trafficking. Before Maria, drugs arrived in Naples through a chaotic network of intermediaries: Turkish couriers, Albanian gangs, Neapolitan dock workers. Too many mouths, too much noise. Maria simplifies the chain. She negotiates directly with Balkan suppliers, some of whom had connections to militias from the Yugoslav wars. These men aren't amateurs. They're used to brutality, power, and corruption. But Maria surprises them. She arrives to meetings with binders, not bodyguards. She talks logistics, market trends, geopolitical pressure points. She understands their business better than they do. One Albanian associate would later recall, "She asked about my mother's health before asking about the cargo. That's when I knew we'd do business for a long time." Many people still think that Maria's success in foreign negotiations came from being underestimated. Maybe that's true. But also, she was simply more competent than most of the men in the room. She organizes fixed shipping routes, uses legal cargo companies to mask contraband, pays customs agents with clean money, and she sets expectations: timeliness, discretion, and consistency. When one Balkan group delivers late, she doesn't yell. She simply cancels their next 5 shipments. They beg to return. She allows it, but at a reduced commission. Even criminals fear a woman who treats crime like customer service. And all the while, she stays in Naples, never moves north, never buys a villa, never flies private. She eats dinner at the same table she sat at as a girl, visits the same tailor, lights the same candle at the same church pew each Sunday. She doesn't need to flaunt her power. Everyone else does it for her. By now, Maria Licciardi has turned Secondigliano into something more than a stronghold. It's a blueprint. The way she operates ripples across Italy's underworld, quietly redrawing the lines of what a boss can be. No one would mistake her for a figurehead anymore. She's not just steering the Licciardi clan. She's curating the entire culture of the Camorra in real time. Still, Maria's greatest strength lies in the fact that she doesn't look like she's doing any of that. To the outsider, she remains invisible. To the insider, she's inevitable. Inside her network, things continue to evolve. She begins implementing what her people call il metodo Maria, a style of management that balances old-world honor with new-world logistics. Her lieutenants refer to it as a manual that doesn't exist, because it isn't written down anywhere, but everyone knows the rules. No business is allowed to operate without permission, not a single cafe, construction project, or truck route. If someone wants to open a shop, they go through her people, not to pay a bribe, but to join a network. Maria doesn't just tax businesses, she integrates them. A fishmonger in Scampia receives his inventory through a supplier Maria controls. The supplier gets credit from a bank she owns through a third party. The bank receives government subsidies thanks to a civil servant whose nephew works for one of Maria's shell companies. It's not extortion, it's infrastructure. Of course, not everyone sees it that way. There are still rivals. Old-school Camorra bosses who think Maria is too soft, too delicate, too modern. They don't like her refusal to wage open war. They miss the chaos, the car bombs, the newspaper headlines, so they test her. In 1999, a minor clan, small but proud, starts pushing heroin on one of her key corners in Secondigliano. No permission, no profit sharing, no communication, just a bold claim on what they think is up for grabs. Maria doesn't respond with bullets. She responds with silence. For a week, then, one by one, their delivery drivers begin getting delayed. A tire here, a police inspection there, a missing shipment, an anonymous tip. Within 10 days, their entire operation collapses. No bloodshed, just gentle pressure, like gravity. And then a letter, hand-delivered, short, respectful. Just 4 lines. I understand you're expanding. Let me know if you'd like help keeping it quiet. They join the alliance 2 weeks later. But as her influence solidifies, something else begins to surface. An aura of myth. In the poorer parts of Naples, women speak her name with something between fear and reverence. They say she never forgets a favor, that she has a list of every child in the neighborhood and what each of them needs, that she personally delivered groceries to a widow during the worst rainstorm in years. Do you remember the priest, Father Donato? He's still there, still preaching in a cracked old church with plaster peeling from the walls. One morning after Mass, he tells a parishioner, "I've buried more young men than old, but I've never buried a fool who listened to Maria." And yet with respect comes scrutiny. Law enforcement, increasingly frustrated by Maria's untouchability, begin shifting tactics. They realize they'll never get her with surveillance. She's too careful. She speaks in person, uses no phones, never repeats herself, so they turn their attention to those around her. In late 1999, a sting operation captures a mid-level logistics coordinator named Vincenzo. He's sloppy, arrogant, and newly rich, a dangerous combination. They offer him a deal, lesser charges, maybe a lighter sentence. All he has to do is tell them about Maria. Vincenzo doesn't bite, not because he's loyal, but because he's terrified. "There's nothing to tell," he says. "I never met her alone. I never saw her do anything. I don't even know if she likes espresso or cappuccino." That's the level of her control. People in her inner circle can't describe her preferences. Not out of secrecy, but out of design. Maria keeps herself simple, harder to trace that way. Her daily life remains almost aggressively normal. She shops at the same grocer she always has. She attends the same Mass. She walks the same streets, in the same shoes, with the same pace. Never rushed, never flashy. And yet, when she passes, people straighten up. One shopkeeper describes it like this: "She walks like someone who knows she'll be the last one standing in the room." And it's not just Naples anymore. Her connections stretch across Italy now, into Milan, Bologna, Palermo. She funds warehouses in Trieste, owns trucking companies in Bari. She has suppliers in the Balkans, fixers in Marseille, legal contacts in Zurich. She moves people like currency, information like breath. And through it all, she maintains a singular posture, calm, maternal, unshakable. When one of her drivers crashes a truck full of high-value cargo, the entire operation is at risk. Police are circling. Everyone expects Maria to disappear, to go underground. Instead, she visits the driver in the hospital. She brings fruit and a warning. "You get one accident," she says, "and one prayer. You've used both. He never misses a delivery again. Many people still think that Maria's quiet rule couldn't last, that something would eventually break. And in a way, they're right, because soon, her reach stretches just a little too far. She touches something too messy, too public, too risky. And when it snaps back, it will unravel the illusion of invisibility she's built so perfectly. But that moment hasn't arrived yet. For now, Maria Licciardi walks through Naples like a ghost in daylight, everywhere and nowhere. And Naples, for all its chaos, remains silent beneath her feet. It's the year 2000, and for most of Naples, things look eerily calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, but from control. The kind of calm you don't trust. Streets that once echoed with gunfire now buzz with mopeds and market chatter. The chaos hasn't vanished. It's just been moved underground, organized, scheduled. Maria Licciardi's fingerprints aren't found on any crime scenes, but her presence is felt in every corner of the city, like a hum in the walls you can't unhear. Then, as if the universe suddenly remembers how fragile illusions can be, something cracks. The operation that breaks the surface isn't one of her own. It belongs to an Albanian trafficking ring connected, loosely but unmistakably, to the Secondigliano alliance. For years, Maria has worked quietly with Balkan suppliers. They provide drugs, mostly heroin, and occasionally smuggle people. It's part of the larger machine, but this time, something goes wrong. A shipment of girls, yes, girls, teenagers, arrives in Naples from Albania. They were promised work, maybe restaurants, maybe modeling, the usual lie. But what awaits them is prostitution, violent, relentless, and utterly without mercy. One of the girls dies, not in silence, not in some back alley where no one's watching. She dies at a checkpoint, an immigration holding area under Italian jurisdiction. And someone leaks it to the press. The headlines hit like a hammer. Neapolitan mafia, tied to human trafficking ring. Young Albanian girl dies in transit. Organized crime involved in sexual exploitation of minors. Government calls for inquiry. Suddenly the thing Maria has feared most happens. Attention. She has built her empire like a ghost house. No reflections, no fingerprints, no shadows. But now, the floodlights are on. Inside her circle, there's panic. Not just because of the death, but because of the messiness. This isn't how Maria works. She's known for clean operations, controlled environments, quiet exits. This is ugly. She doesn't deny involvement. She doesn't try to rewrite history. What she does is far more subtle and infinitely colder. First, she cuts off contact with the Albanian ring entirely. Not a phone call, not a courier, not a farewell. One day, they're part of the network. The next day, their names disappear from the books. The routes are reassigned. The buyers are redirected. Then she calls a meeting. It's not dramatic. It takes place in a parking garage under a supermarket she quietly owns. Half a dozen mid-level capos attend, each representing a different piece of the alliance. They expect anger, maybe even punishment. Instead, Maria simply says, "This is not who we are. If you want chaos, find another house." They nod. They understand. Still, the damage is done. The Italian government, under increasing pressure from European watchdogs, launches a new anti-mafia task force. Naples is suddenly crawling with undercover agents. Wiretaps increase. Surveillance teams set up in empty apartments. Even Maria's own church isn't spared. One of the confession booths is bugged for a month before they realize she doesn't confess to anyone but God. The headlines keep coming, and the public wants someone to blame. Many people still think that if Maria had been a man, the reaction might have been different. But there's something uniquely threatening about a woman controlling this much violence. The state, still largely male in its institutions, finds her both alien and unacceptable, so they make her a target. Not officially, not at first, but gradually the noose tightens. Her associates begin getting picked up, one by one. A driver here, a money launderer there. A mid-level supplier folds under pressure and starts talking. Not much, just names, rumors. Enough to build a web, and at the center of that web, La Piccola, La Madrina, Maria Licciardi. In Naples, the whispers begin again. Not about her fall, no one's foolish enough to say that yet, but about her vulnerability. For the first time in years, there's a crack in her armor. Some of her allies grow nervous. A few begin hedging their bets, holding back tribute, moving their own product, making quiet calls to other clans. Maria knows. She always knows. She doesn't react immediately. That's not her way. Instead, she retreats. For weeks, she's barely seen in public. Her visits to the grocer stop. Mass attendance becomes sporadic. The lights in her apartment flicker less frequently in the evenings. It's like she's evaporated again. But she hasn't. She's planning. Because Maria understands something that many bosses forget. The most powerful move is not to strike, but to remain unstruck. In this silence, she begins reshuffling her lines of communication. She breaks her network into smaller cells, moves funds through new channels, prepares safe houses, even sends one trusted lieutenant to Calabria, not for an alliance, but as a contingency. And then, almost casually, she reemerges. She's seen at a wedding. Not a big one, a cousin's niece, something quiet. She wears a navy blue shawl, speaks with the bride's grandfather, and brings a gift wrapped in plain paper. When she leaves, people say she looked thinner, tired, but very much in control. Because here's the truth no one wants to say aloud. She's still the boss. One girl's death may shake the walls, but Maria built the foundation too deep to crack. Still, she knows what's coming. She can feel the walls closing in. And for the first time in her life, she begins to wonder if, maybe, just maybe, it's time to disappear. But disappearing isn't so easy when the world is finally looking right at you. The year is 2001, and Maria Licciardi is no longer a rumor. She's on file. She's on watch lists. She's officially a person of interest. And still, she's one step ahead. Because Maria doesn't panic. She adjusts. At this stage in her life, most bosses would either retreat fully underground or double down with violence. Maria does neither. She does something only she could pull off. She becomes even more ordinary. She stops attending major gatherings. No weddings, no baptisms, no funerals. Her name fades from the guest lists and the surveillance transcripts. But the decisions keep being made. Routes are still active. Money still moves. Streets stay quiet. And the alliance? Still intact. So how does she do it? Through others. Maria builds a wall of whispers. People who speak on her behalf but never say her name. A system of proxies. She splits her presence across a dozen mouths, each one carrying a fraction of the message. That way, no one knows everything, and she knows everything. This is the moment where she stops being a person and becomes a presence. Those in the alliance begin referring to her moves as I segnali, the signals. A delayed shipment, a reassignment of territory, a sudden silence from a known contact. It's not written, it's not said, but it's understood. Maria has made a decision, and yet the pressure continues to build. The state's wiretaps catch nothing explicit, but the web is tightening. A few lieutenants crack under questioning. The prosecutors can't connect Maria to direct crimes, but they can feel her hand behind the curtain. It's like watching shadows move when you've already turned off the lights. Then finally, the authorities decide they don't need proof. They need presence. An arrest warrant is issued for Maria Licciardi. They know she's not going to come quietly. But they also know she's not going to go far. And they're right, because despite everything, despite the heat, the press, the betrayal, Maria never leaves Naples, not for good. Oh, she vanishes for a while, disappears from her usual haunts. She's not at home. Her driver's car is abandoned in an alleyway. Her phone lines go dead. For a moment, even her most loyal followers begin to whisper, "Has she left us?" But then, a month later, an envelope arrives at a bakery in Secondigliano. Inside, instructions. Not demands, not threats. Just a reallocation of assets, a clarification of responsibilities, and a note at the bottom. "Tell Vincenzo to water the plants while I'm away." No signature, but no one needs one. Because she hasn't fled, she's just stepped aside. Where does she go? That's the mystery. Some say she hides in a convent, cloaked in silence and prayer. Others claim she's in Corsica, staying in a borrowed villa owned by a businessman with no last name. A few believe she never left Naples at all, just moved to a different floor in the same building. A queen in exile behind her own curtains. Whatever the truth, her power doesn't fade. In fact, it settles in deeper. From wherever she is, Maria continues to run her empire like a conductor from behind the stage. She writes nothing, uses no phones. Everything travels by word of mouth and paper folded twice. A message might pass through 5 people before reaching its destination. Each one knows only what they need, and none of them speak above a whisper. Her influence becomes a test of faith. You don't follow Maria because you see her. You follow her because everything still works, and it does, perhaps better than before. During her absence, there's no chaos, no wars. The alliance holds firm. New deals are struck. Old debts are collected. The money flows, steady as a tide. Many people still think that disappearing was the most dangerous thing Maria ever did. That by vanishing, she proved she didn't need to be seen to be obeyed. But it wasn't a bluff. It was a tactic. She knew that visibility was a liability, that the more she appeared in newspapers or court documents, the easier it would be to erase her. So she did it herself. She erased the parts of her the world could reach, before they could try. It's during this quiet period that something unusual happens. A few rival clans begin to imitate her style. One boss in Casoria stops using phones altogether. Another introduces Maria's rotating territory model in his district. Even the Sicilians take note. A Palermo capo is quoted saying, "If Maria ran Sicily, we'd all be retired by now." Of course, this imitation comes with risk, because none of them are Maria. They don't have her discipline, her memory, her patience, and soon enough, things start to fall apart. Just not in her house. She watches the collapse from the shadows. A new alliance forms among younger bosses, ambitious, flashy, desperate. They resent Maria's order. They want noise, headlines, fear. For them, the old ways are too slow. They begin making moves, undermining rules, pushing into territories governed by Maria's lieutenants. But her response is nothing at first. And that's worse than a bullet, because they start to feel it. The silence, the slow compression of every crack in their operation. Suddenly, trucks don't arrive. Suppliers stop answering. Bribes are returned, rejected. And then the arrests come, not from Maria, from the state, because somewhere, someone tipped off the right office. And those ambitious young bosses, most don't survive the next 5 years. on paper or in person. Do you remember how Maria handled the bar owner who mocked her? Same playbook, different game. She doesn't eliminate problems. She erases their options. And Naples, scarred, worn, but still breathing, remains under her shadow. Even now, no one dares to say she's gone, because Maria Licciardi doesn't leave Naples. She just walks slower when the streetlights flicker. They say a true leader doesn't need to shout, and by now, Maria Licciardi has practically trademarked the concept. She doesn't need to raise her voice, raise her profile, or raise a finger. Her empire rises on its own, quietly, methodically, with the slow certainty of a tide. And what makes Maria different, what really sets her apart, is that she never tries to be what the world expects a Camorra boss to look like. She's not the Godfather type. She doesn't wear flashy jewelry, doesn't drape herself in custom suits, doesn't go out with entourages. No sunglasses indoors, no leopard print sofas, no throne. Maria wears knit cardigans, eats lentil soup, answers the door herself when the delivery boy knocks. And yet, in Naples, her name holds more weight than any judge, politician, or cardinal. By the time the early 2000s roll around, even the people who once doubted her authority now refer to her with a kind of respectful fear. She's not the boss. She's La Signora, the lady. And the lady doesn't need to remind you who she is. But Maria knows something else too. She knows this quiet rule of hers can't last forever. Because even when you control the streets, the economy, the timing of shipments, and the minds of your rivals, you can't control time. New players are arriving. Younger men, louder men, boys who grew up with satellite TV and American gangster films, boys who confuse fear with power. They're not subtle. They don't believe in alliances or accounting ledgers. They want Instagram fame, Rolexes, street cred. Maria sees them as a liability, but also as a warning. The world she helped build is evolving, whether she likes it or not. So she adapts. Rather than challenge them, she recruits a few, but not the flashiest ones. She finds the quiet ones in the back, boys who watch more than they speak, boys like she was once. She puts them to work in real logistics, waste management, import, export, real estate. The others? She lets the state deal with them, sometimes with a whisper in the right ear. Maria's method doesn't change. It deepens. She knows what they don't. Real power is the power to outlast. And oh, how she's lasted. Under her, the Secondigliano alliance becomes almost bureaucratic in its efficiency. There are weekly updates, silent audits, rotating drop locations, and backups for every backup. It's not crime. It's a corporation. One lieutenant jokes, "We're more organized than the postal service." Maria doesn't laugh. She nods. But not everyone finds her approach amusing. One faction, led by a boss named Nunzio Capasso, tries to push back. Nunzio is brash, violent, and loud. The kind of man Maria has spent her career outmaneuvering. He thinks her style is weakness, thinks he can fill the vacuum left by her subtle withdrawal from the public sphere, so he makes a move. He tries to seize part of a lucrative territory near the port, an area Maria has maintained through quiet diplomacy with another family. No shots are fired, but the message is clear. He's done waiting. Maria's response is predictable, but no less brutal for its quietness. She sends no soldiers. What arrives instead is a fire inspection, then a tax audit, then a sudden drop in product availability. Her suppliers, after all, are loyal. And finally, 2 of Nunzio's trusted men are caught with undeclared cash at a checkpoint. Police, tip-offs. No one says Maria's name, but everyone knows. Within 3 weeks, Nunzio's operation is in pieces. He doesn't retaliate. He relocates, quietly, permanently. Maria's legend grows, But even legends gather shadows. Law enforcement continues to circle. They now know she's still active, even if they can't touch her. They begin to turn her associates. Slowly, painfully, one by one. And Maria starts to feel it. It's not fear, it's friction. Meetings that once took an hour now take 3. Messages that used to flow freely now get delayed. Trust is harder to maintain. The costs of staying ahead are rising. And yet, she keeps moving forward. There's a story from this period about a meeting she holds with 5 of her most senior lieutenants. They gather in an old farmhouse just outside the city. No lights, no cell phones, just kerosene lamps and voices. Maria sits at the head of the table. One of the younger men starts complaining, says the risk is getting too high, says maybe it's time to modernize, meaning faster deals, bigger risks, digital channels. Maria listens. Then she reaches into her purse and pulls out a simple silver spoon. She places it on the table. "You know what this is?" she asks. Everyone stares. She doesn't wait for an answer. This is how heroin used to be cooked. On a spoon, in silence, in basements, before the noise, before the mess. This spoon built what you're sitting on. Don't forget that. No one speaks for a full minute, because when Maria reminds you where you came from, you remember. Many people still think this was the moment her lieutenants realized something. They weren't just working under her. They were working because of her. Because without Maria, the whole thing would fall into chaos. And yet, Maria herself starts pulling back, a little more each day. She lets others speak at meetings, delegates more, stops appearing at key drop sites. She's no longer disappearing. She's softening, smoothing the edges of her rule so that no one notices she's preparing for something she won't say out loud. Maybe retirement, maybe one last chapter, but for now, the streets are still quiet. The alliance still holds. The name Maria Licciardi still travels farther than any gunshot ever could. And Naples, for all its noise, still whispers when she walks by. In the early mornings of Naples, before the city stirs fully awake, there's a moment of perfect stillness. No traffic, no barking dogs, just that soft Mediterranean light creeping through alleyways like it's trying not to be noticed. That's when Maria Licciardi prefers to move, if she moves at all. But more often now, she doesn't. Because by 2003, her reign has entered its most delicate phase. Not because she's weaker, because she's perfected the art of stillness. Maria isn't invisible anymore. She's unavoidable. Her name, once spoken in coded whispers, now drifts through law enforcement briefings, academic conferences, even political discussions. She's been labeled everything: the female boss of bosses, the architect of the modern Camorra, the godmother of logic. Each title is a little dramatic, sure, but also a little true. And still, she keeps to her routines. Same apartment, same markets, same shoes. It's part of the illusion. Because while the world debates her myth, Maria is building something far more dangerous than any legend. A network so entrenched in Naples that even her absence wouldn't change its shape. She's structuring succession. Maria has no illusions about immortality. She's too smart for that. She knows that power doesn't last unless it outgrows the person holding it. And so, over the next 2 years, she slowly transfers day-to-day control to a trusted group of senior operators, most of whom she's raised from street kids into businessmen. They call her La Professoressa behind closed doors because she teaches, she corrects, she rewrites their notes in red pen, figuratively, sometimes literally. One of her inner circle, a man named Franco, once left a sloppy routing plan on her desk. When he returned the next day, she'd redrawn the entire thing, annotated it, and left a sticky note that said, "A child could follow this, but you'll do better next time." He did. Maria doesn't just run a clan, she nurtures a culture, one based on competence, precision, restraint, and that's what makes her most terrifying. She has turned organized crime into something dangerously close to good governance. Meanwhile, outside her walls, the world continues to shift. Law enforcement is changing tactics again. Less brute force, more data. Less showy raids, more digital tracing. They begin monitoring logistics firms, tax records, real estate holdings. They're not chasing capos anymore. They're following invoices, and those invoices, occasionally, lead back to Maria. She senses the pressure, not just legally, but generationally. New recruits don't respect the old rules the way they used to. They don't understand why discretion is more valuable than dominance, why silence is power. Maria tries to teach them, but some refuse to learn. There's a moment that perfectly captures this tension. A young enforcer, fresh from prison and eager to prove himself, barges into a sit-down in Scampia, talking loudly, gesturing wildly, naming names. Maria is there, sitting in the corner, sipping a demi-tasse. She says nothing, just watches. After the meeting, she asks the room to clear. She keeps only the young man. We don't know exactly what she said, but he leaves the building white-faced and silent, transfers to Bari within a week, never speaks in public again. Maria doesn't yell. She reconfigures your soul without raising her voice, but still, things are fraying. Many people still think the cracks in the Secondiliano alliance started with the new generation. That's partly true. But the bigger issue is external. Politics. A regional crackdown on corruption, spurred by international observers and pressure from the EU, has begun targeting not just criminals, but the entire shadow economy they've built. That means shell companies, permits, side contracts, laundering fronts. In other words, Maria's architecture. She knows it's only a matter of time. So, she leans even harder into clean ventures. Food distribution, sanitation services, construction, waste management. These aren't just fronts anymore. They're legitimate empires. She even begins consulting. That's right. Maria Licciardi, under pseudonyms and layers of intermediaries, becomes a logistics advisor for a string of regional businesses. Her insights on inventory flow, human resource management, supply line resilience are impeccable. One local company executive, never realizing who he's quoting, once said, "Whoever wrote these recommendations should be running a city." And maybe she should, because Maria isn't managing criminals anymore. She's managing civilization. Still, the criminal foundation never fully disappears. The heroin routes continue, now laundered through foreign casinos and tourism companies. The real estate empire grows. Cash turns clean faster than ever before. The alliance becomes so efficient that some cities in northern Italy begin quietly tolerating its presence, because at least under Maria's people, the trains run on time. And yet, even shadows leave a trail when the sun is bright enough. That trail leads prosecutors back to Naples again. This time it's different. They don't chase the money. They chase the silence. They build a case based on omissions, gaps in testimony. The strange rhythm of operations that continue even after a key operator vanishes. They begin mapping Maria's ghost movements, how a request whispered in Scampia leads to a bribe in Bologna 4 days later. They call it La Rete Invisibile, the invisible net. And at the center of that net, still untouched, Maria. She remains calm. There's no bunker, no armed compound. She has a plan. She always has a plan. But even she knows this. When the system is that quiet, when everything is humming just a little too perfectly, something's about to rupture. The question isn't if, it's when. By 2004, Maria Licciardi is a legend wrapped in warm cardigans and cool logic. She's the architect of a system so smooth, it's hard to tell where legality ends and crime begins. The boundaries blur, and that's by design. But the world doesn't stay blurred forever, and the state is finally sharpening its focus. The government, galvanized by recent successes against Cosa Nostra in Sicily, begins pivoting resources toward Naples. New prosecutors, young and restless, are brought in. They want a trophy. And Maria's name, once just a rumor on a wiretap, is now pinned to every corkboard in every anti-mafia office from Palermo to Milan. But here's the paradox. The more they look for Maria, the harder she is to see. She no longer signs anything. She doesn't use phones, write notes, or even give orders directly. Everything travels mouth to mouth, eye to eye. She could be 2 blocks away from a surveillance van and still remain completely untouchable. So the state takes a new approach. Pressure from the edges. They begin arresting low-level operatives, street dealers, lookouts, couriers, anyone whose name even brushes against the alliance. Then they work upward. Family members, old friends. One of Maria's laundry managers is placed under 24/7 watch. Another, her second cousin's son, is picked up and questioned for 30 hours. Maria watches. She doesn't panic, but she adjusts. The alliance meetings shift from weekly to monthly. New meeting locations are picked based on airflow, wall thickness, proximity to churches, and the direction of traffic patterns. Yes, really. No detail is too small. Her lieutenants are told to limit contact, rotate roles, stop using the same drivers, rehearse stories. Maria rewrites the entire operating manual. Again, she even changes her own routine. No more walking alone. Her groceries are now delivered. Her Sunday Mass attendance becomes unpredictable. Once every few weeks, always at a different church, never the same pew twice, but the pressure keeps mounting. And then finally a break. In early 2001, yes, it goes back that far, law enforcement intercepts a meeting between 2 mid-level players. One of them mentions La Signora del Regol, the Lady of Rules. That's enough. The prosecutors begin framing Maria not just as a figurehead, but as the strategic heart of the Camorra. They build their case slowly, pulling on every thread. Money laundering, drug trafficking, real estate fraud, even human trafficking. The web expands, and yet nothing sticks, because Maria never touches anything. She's built an empire with her fingerprints scrubbed from every surface. But then a mistake, not hers. One of her closest allies, a man named Paolo Di Agnello, gets caught in a sting operation involving a heroin shipment routed through Greece. Under questioning, he doesn't name Maria. He's too smart for that. But he slips. He references a dinner, a conversation, a single phrase. She said to pause all southern shipments. That she opens the door. Within days, the arrest warrant is renewed. This time, it names her explicitly. Not as a suspect, not as a ghost, as La Boss. Maria knows the net is tightening. Her own people are growing nervous. A few begin asking questions they never would have before. Do we move her? Should we prepare an escape? But Maria refuses. She won't run, because Naples is her house, her blood, her cathedral of shadows. And to flee now would be to admit it's all over, that she was just holding borrowed time. So she does something unexpected. She calls a meeting, in person. It happens in a farmhouse in the hills outside Caserta. No electricity. Phones left in the car. 3 trusted lieutenants and Maria. That's it. They say she enters wearing gray, plain, unadorned. Sits down, pours coffee, says nothing for almost 10 minutes. Then she speaks. I've built this to survive me. but it hasn't outgrown me yet. So we finish what we started. Quietly, carefully, and if they come for me, you don't protect me. You protect what we built. It's not a goodbye, it's a blueprint. From that point on, Maria begins detaching, not vanishing, not surrendering, just stepping back. Layer by layer, she transfers authority to a triumvirate of younger operatives, each trained, hand-picked, and monitored over the years. She audits the finances one last time, reassigns contact points, dismantles overlapping routes, simplifies everything, and then she waits. For nearly a year, nothing happens. She lives quietly, rarely seen, still in Naples, but wrapped in a layer of obscurity so dense, even her neighbors aren't sure she's still in the building. Until August 14th, 2001, Maria Licciardi, 50 years old, is arrested by Italian police at Ciampino Airport in Rome. The details are cinematic. She's reportedly en route to a family wedding, flying commercial, wearing a simple black dress, no jewelry, no entourage. She carries a bag with rosary beads, a bottle of holy water, and a folded shopping list. The arrest is quiet. She says nothing, doesn't protest, doesn't resist, just looks the officer in the eye and nods, as if she's been expecting this since before they were born. And in that moment, the world finally sees her, not just as a whisper or a rumor or a theory, but as a woman, human, small, composed, real. The headlines explode. La Madrina arrested in Rome airport. Queen of Naples, crime syndicate in custody. Maria Licciardi, the lady who never left Naples, caught at last. Many people still think this was the end, but Maria knows better, because an empire doesn't collapse when its queen is captured. It collapses when no one remembers the rules she left behind, and hers are still being followed. The arrest of Maria Licciardi ripples through Naples like a dropped stone in still water. Not a crash, not a tidal wave, just concentric circles of silence growing wider, deeper. The city doesn't erupt in chaos, no shootouts, no retribution. Instead, the streets just pause, because for the first time in decades, La Signora isn't there. But here's the strange thing. Nothing stops working. Shipments still move. Meetings still happen. Payments are still collected. Debts still enforced. And silence still honored. It's as if Maria's arrest was merely an administrative change, like a regional manager taking a temporary leave of absence. And in a way, that's exactly how she planned it. Back in Rome, the state has what it wanted. A photo of Maria Licciardi in handcuffs. Proof that no one, not even the lady, is untouchable. She's held at Rebibbia prison, in the women's section. No bail, no press access, just cold concrete and a view of the sky through a tiny square of wire mesh. The tabloids paint her as everything from a criminal mastermind to a feminist icon. One magazine even calls her Italy's real-life Lady Macbeth, which is a little ironic, considering Maria never needed a man to whisper in anyone's ear. Inside, she doesn't say much. She keeps to herself, follows the routine, speaks politely when spoken to. She reads, occasionally prays, and writes letters. Never about business. Just recipes, advice, memories. A guard would later say. She could have run a monastery. She had that kind of presence. The prosecutors, however, are less awed. They want her to crack, to confess, to unravel the very system she built. They try everything. Isolation, long interviews, cross-examinations about deals that go back 15 years. They offer deals, leniency, even the chance to see family under lighter conditions. Maria doesn't budge, because Maria knows something they don't. Confession isn't surrender, it's strategy. And she has no intention of playing that game. Instead, she lets them talk themselves in circles. She nods politely during sessions, occasionally asks for clarification, never denies, never confirms. One prosecutor says it's like interrogating fog. The case against her is complicated. They have stories, surveillance, hearsay. They've got the public narrative. Woman rises to power, orchestrates massive alliance, traffics drugs, launders money. But they don't have the smoking gun. No direct wiretap, no signed order, no transfer in her name. So they go wide. They charge her with multiple counts: mafia association, conspiracy to traffic narcotics, corruption. Some charges stick, others wobble under scrutiny. The trial begins. It's quiet. No press frenzy outside the courthouse, no Netflix documentary, just another case in the endless war against organized crime. Maria arrives in simple clothing, a dark coat, modest earrings, no makeup. She carries herself not like a prisoner, but like a librarian visiting a hearing on book policy. She says little. Her lawyers speak for her. They argue procedural failures, vague witness testimony, lack of direct evidence. Maria just sits, hands folded, as if judging the court rather than being judged. And in some ways she is, because back in Naples things are holding. Her lieutenants, trained, tested, quietly empowered, continue her work, not perfectly, but effectively. The Second Digliano alliance bends slightly, but does not break. Even rival clans hesitate to make moves, because while Maria may be in a cell, her memory isn't. And no one wants to be the first to challenge her legacy. There's a moment in the trial that stands out. A prosecutor holds up a ledger from a bakery owned by one of Maria's shell companies. The numbers match up with suspicious deposits traced to an Albanian supplier. He asks the court, "Who writes such clean books for illegal operations?" And someone in the gallery murmurs, "Maria, it's not meant as a joke. It's reverence." Because even her critics admit she's a perfectionist. Many people still think Maria could have walked free if she had just cooperated. Named names, pulled at the threads she herself had stitched. But Maria never breaks ranks, not because of loyalty, not because of fear. Because of design, she built her empire to run without her. And now she's proving it can. Eventually, the court reaches a decision. Maria is sentenced, not for every crime they suspect, but enough to justify the effort. She receives a term of 8 years for mafia association and facilitating organized crime activity. Some charges fall away due to lack of evidence. She nods when the sentence is read. No reaction, no appeal. Just a soft smile, like someone finishing a long, complicated recipe and placing it in the oven. While in prison, she remains the quiet storm she's always been. She avoids cliques, doesn't engage in power games, offers advice when asked, but never gives orders. And yet, the other women in the facility begin treating her like a matriarch. Disputes stop when she walks into the common room. Guards lower their voices when speaking to her. A kitchen worker gives her the best cut of meat, not because she asked, but because it feels right. Maria doesn't build empires out of force. She builds them out of memory. Naples keeps humming. The headlines fade. The prosecutors move on to the next name, the next investigation. But in Secondigliano, they still leave flowers outside a certain bakery on Maria's birthday. Not out of fear, out of habit. Because in a world that worships noise, Maria Licciardi made silence into a weapon, and Naples remembers. Always. Maria Licciardi is in prison, but her absence does not create a vacuum. It creates a rhythm. The systems she established continue ticking forward, tight, smooth, obedient to the order she spent decades fine-tuning. She isn't running things, not directly, but she doesn't need to. Her voice echoes in the routines, in the silence between deliveries, in the efficiency of books balanced without being touched. Even in lockup, Maria remains Naples' most effective administrator. Her sentence is considered light by some, heavy by others. 8 years feels like an eternity to prosecutors who expected her to crack. But to Maria, it's a pause. Not an ending. Just a corridor between rooms. She doesn't sulk. She reads. She writes. She listens. In Rabibia, she becomes something of an institution. Older inmates begin referring to her as La Zia, the aunt. Young women ask her about money, how to invest it. One even asks for help writing a resume. Maria obliges, but even as she adapts to prison life outside the walls, things begin to shift. The Secondigliano alliance, while still intact, shows signs of strain. The new leadership, though capable, is not Maria. They lack her instinct for pressure, her precision with silence. Small cracks appear, a missed shipment here, a delayed payout there. Nothing fatal, but noticeable. More troubling is the return of the old-style violence Maria had worked so hard to temper. Younger affiliates, less schooled in her methods, start reverting to the comfort of fear. A bouncer is beaten for refusing a cut. A nightclub firebombed for turning away a bagman. The newspapers start buzzing again. Camorra blood spills in Naples nightlife. Return of turf wars in Scampia. Maria, hearing of these from inside, reacts the way she always does. Calmly. She doesn't write letters, doesn't send instructions. But in one recorded prison visit with a former lieutenant, she reportedly says only, "They've forgotten what silence costs. It's a warning and a lesson." The lieutenant nods. 2 weeks later, the violence ebbs. It's not magic, it's Maria. Her name alone still corrects behavior. Back in prison, she continues to observe. She sees the flaws in the system. Not just hers, but the state's. Guards that cut corners. Inmates who traffic cell phones. Bureaucrats who sign forms without reading them. The same quiet rot that once allowed her to build a criminal empire now appears in the very institution trying to contain her. She smiles at the irony, and she waits. In 2006, the prison system begins considering early release programs for nonviolent offenders over a certain age. Maria qualifies on paper, but not in spirit. The state debates her case. Some argue she's reformed. Others argue she's simply resting. Eventually, the motion stalls. And Maria? She doesn't protest. She doesn't file appeals. She just keeps to her routine, because Maria knows being forgotten is the greatest disguise. In the outside world, people begin to move on. A new government takes office. The Sicilian mafia implodes after a series of arrests. The headlines shift to Rome scandals and banking crises. Maria fades from public conversation, but inside the alliance, she's still present. Do you remember Franco, the lieutenant who once left her a sloppy logistics map? He's now one of the primary coordinators. He runs his routes exactly how she taught him. He keeps detailed records, pays on time, never says her name, but always leaves an extra chair at his meetings. One day, after a new recruit complains about the rules being too strict, Franco slaps a spoon on the table. "This," he says, "is the reason you're not dead. So shut up and keep listening." The story spreads. Another legend, another reminder. And Maria, still in prison, still quietly powerful. There's a woman she befriends inside, Luciana, mid-30s, jailed for drug-related charges. They form a kind of quiet bond. Luciana is brash, emotional, impatient. Maria listens to her rant, then softly offers alternatives. "You don't control the world," she tells her once. "You control your response to it." Luciana eventually calms. Studies. Earns her GED. Writes poetry. When she's released, she sends Maria a letter every week. Never about crime. Always about growth. Maria keeps every letter in a shoebox beneath her bed. Many people still think prison broke her, but the truth is more complicated. Prison didn't break Maria. It distilled her. It separated the theatrics of her empire from the substance. What remained was leaner, quieter, harder to trace, but no less potent. In 2007, one of her former rivals is gunned down in broad daylight, an old-school act of revenge from a few decades old. It makes the front pages. Analysts speculate that the old ways are returning. Maria's response, according to those close to her, a single word: amateurs, because she knows better. Fear fades, memory lasts. Her empire, now running mostly on memory, keeps surviving, not through new violence, but through inertia, loyalty, and routine. And in many ways, that's more dangerous. Maria Licciardi doesn't need to return to Naples, because in Naples she never really left. By 2008, Maria Licciardi has spent nearly 7 years behind bars. Most inmates count the time in days. Maria counts in patterns. She tracks who visits whom, how often the guards change their patrols, which prisoners receive letters, and which ones suddenly stop. To her, the prison is not a sentence. It's a syllabus. She learns, she maps, she waits, and the world outside? It changes, but only a little. The alliance holds, despite everything. Not as tightly, not as elegantly, but it holds. Her lieutenants, though no longer fresh-faced, are disciplined. Her code, the unspoken rule book built over decades, continues to shape decisions, conversations, even silences. In fact, her absence only reinforces the structure. People begin saying things like, "She wouldn't have allowed this," or "Maria would have done it differently." It becomes a kind of doctrine. Every disagreement is settled by asking, what would she have done? This is what real power looks like. You don't have to be there. You just have to have been there long enough. But beneath the surface, Maria knows something is shifting. Not with her people, with the city. Naples is changing in ways even she couldn't have anticipated. Smartphones, surveillance, new laws on wiretapping. The next generation of criminals doesn't understand the Camorra of her youth. They grow up on movies, on American rap lyrics, on YouTube clips of shootouts from South America. They're louder, more reckless, and far less patient. Many of them have never known a world where silence was a virtue. Maria watches their kind from afar with a kind of exhausted pity. They think the point of power is to be seen. They think violence is strength. But Maria knows. It's discipline that lasts, and she wonders, genuinely, whether her way still has a place in this new world. Then, one day, the warden calls her into the office. Her lawyer is waiting. There's been a review. Her sentence is nearly done. With good behavior, and Maria's behavior has been exemplary, she qualifies for release before the year's end. She simply nods. There's no celebration, no deep sigh, no embrace. Because Maria has been preparing for this moment since the day she was arrested, she doesn't ask what's changed. She just asks, "Where will I be released?" The lawyer gives her the location. Maria nods again. The day she steps out of prison, it's early morning. The air is cool. No cameras, no entourage, no fanfare. She wears the same shoes she wore in. She walks to a waiting car. Nothing flashy, just a dented Fiat Punto with clean windows and a working radio. Her driver is a quiet man in his 40s. She's never seen him before. That's a good thing. The car drives south, slowly, not into Naples, but around it, into the hills, toward nothing in particular. And here, the pacing softens. The world is quieter up here. Trees sway slowly in the wind. The roads curve like riverbeds. A small town looms in the distance, too modest for tourists, too old to change. The car stops at a house with a pale blue door. Maria steps out. She enters without knocking. Inside, Everything is clean, sparse. A table, a kettle, a single chair beside a window. On the wall, a crucifix. Nothing else. This is her new place. Not exile, not retirement, just simplicity. And yet somehow, everything still moves. Within days, word spreads. Not publicly, but among those who still pay attention. She's out. That's all it takes. And Naples adjusts. Old allies visit. Quietly. Always alone. They sit with her for tea. Ask her nothing. She volunteers even less. But somehow, by the end of the visit, their problems are smaller, their paths clearer. Maria doesn't give orders anymore. She gives reminders, and her name still silences a room. But there's no need to return to the center. She knows better than that. The spotlight has changed. It burns hotter, records more. And Maria? She has no interest in being filmed. Instead, she becomes something else, a living relic, a reminder that there was once a way to rule without shouting, to build without spilling, to win without ever raising your hand. She begins gardening, tomatoes, basil, lemons. She begins walking again, early, before sunrise, the way she used to, along dirt paths with bird song and mist. Sometimes she walks for an hour without seeing a soul, and in that quiet, she remembers. She remembers her husband's hands, rough and quiet, her brother's voice, always one step from anger, her mother's kitchen, full of steam and warnings. She remembers the first ledger she ever kept, the first name she ever removed, the first time someone called her Signora without irony, and she breathes, softly, slowly, as if she's exhaling decades. Word count to a 108. When down begins, 300 words. So, if you've made it this far, listener, well done. Let's soften the lights a little more now. The roads of Naples, once pulsing with tension and rhythm, are dimming behind you like a dream. The engines are off. The phones have stopped ringing. And Maria? She's in that quiet house now, the one with the pale blue door, listening to the wind move through lemon trees. She doesn't need to be followed anymore, or feared, or remembered in the ways history tends to remember men who were louder, messier, and far less effective. What she built was not just an empire. It was a system of breath and silence, designed to outlive her voice. You might be thinking, how does it end? Will she ever return? But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is this. Some people shape the world by showing up, others by staying just far enough away that you forget they were ever there, until you realize everything around you still runs on their rules. Let your eyes rest now. Let your thoughts slow to a whisper, and let the stillness of Maria's final chapter wrap around you like soft fog on a southern hill, because Naples sleeps easier these days. But somewhere just past the edge of town, she's still awake. End of script. Sweet dreams.